Good afternoon, students, alumni, faculty, and staff. My name is Elena Billing, and I'm the Associate Director of Alumni Relations for the School of Sport, Tourism, and Hospitality Management. Today, I'm pleased to introduce the STHM Alumni Association's Minority Alumni Coalition. The MAC is dedicated to providing educational and eye-opening experiences for all STHM students from diverse perspectives. Today, the MAC's Job Shadow Committee, led by John Krasetsky and Rachel Daly, presents What's Next? The Return of Hospitality and Tourism. This panel will be moderated by Mr. Ira Rosen, Associate Professor here at STHM. Professor Rosen teaches several event management courses and is the program director for the Event Leadership Executive Certificate Program. Additionally, he has owned and operated a full-service event consulting company, Entertainment on Location, Inc., for over 30 years. In addition to working for 7 years with Radio City Music Hall Productions, helping to produce events including the Super Bowl and speaking at numerous conferences and conventions, in September of 2005, he was inducted into the International Festivals and Events Association Hall of Fame. He is one of only 60 people in the world to hold this honor. Professor Rosen, we are very fortunate to have you here leading this discussion. Thank you all for joining us today, and thank you to the MAC and Professor Rosen for hosting all of us. Before we get started, I do have two quick items. First, please feel free to put any questions in the Q&A box throughout the presentation. Questions will be answered at the end of the webinar. Additionally, this webinar will be recorded and posted on STHM Connections and YouTube to share with students and alumni. Now I will turn things over to Professor Rosen to begin this discussion. Professor Rosen.
Thanks, Elena. I really appreciate this opportunity to work with a group of distinguished panelists who will be joining us this afternoon to have a really open dialogue with with our students and alums and faculty who are listening in on for us today. So I'm going to start out with introductions. I'm just going to kind of go around our little group here, and if you could just introduce yourself with your name, who you're currently working for, and what year you graduated. So we'll start. I'm going to look at my little magic squares here. And we'll start with Amy.
Hi, everyone. My name is Amy Bendekovits. I graduated in 2014, which sure feels like a lifetime ago. I currently work for Compass Group. I actually work for Unidine, which is owned by Compass Group, and I'm an operations excellence manager. For those of you who don't know, Compass Group North America is the largest contracted food service company in the world. And in my role, I work specifically in senior living and healthcare, which during a pandemic is a fantastic place to be. Happy to be here, though. I'm very excited.
Thanks, Amy. I appreciate it. China?
Hi, everyone. My name is China West. I am an STHM grad of 2015. Currently, I am an area manager for Amazon under their Global Specialty Fulfillment Division. And also, I'm very glad to be here. So thank you for having me.
Thank you, China. Alex?
Good afternoon, everyone. Happy to be here. Alex Skeete, STHM class of 02. So I think I'm the eldest statesman on the panel. I'm currently the exhibit and sales manager for ATSSA, the American Traffic Safety Services Association, where I'm responsible for all of their sales across the board for the association.
Great, thank you, Alex. And last but certainly not least, Erica.
Hi, everyone. My name is Ira Riddle. I'm currently working at Destination DC in their Tourism, Sports, and Visitor Services Department. And I graduated STHM in the winter of 2017 with a tourism and hospitality focus. Happy to be here.
Great. Thanks, everybody. And just so our group knows how we're going to do this, we've got a whole series of questions, and I'm going to ask each question probably of two different people, but our other panelists, feel free to chime in on any of them. So we're going to go back in reverse order. So Erica, you're going to get to go first. So how has your role or organization adapted in the last year?
Yeah, so my role personally changed a lot throughout the last year. A lot of what I did was in-person activities. So I did familiarization tours, which is inviting travel agents and tour operators from around the world to come to DC, where I would then take them throughout the city and showcase what they can sell to their clients, which are visitors to DC. Of course, with no travel and no in-person activities, that stopped. And then I also did our department's events, which also events are also, pretty much on hold for a while. So a lot of what I did was paused and then taken into the virtual world. So we started doing a lot of virtual client engagement, virtual familiarization tours, which have been going really well. And it's all the virtual world, Zoom is king.
Yeah, sad but true. Sad but true. How about you, Alex?
Yeah, similar to Erica, everything is going virtual. I manage 3,000 plus person convention, responsible for over 115 exhibit booths and lounges. So right around March, when the world ended, we all had to sort of do a quick scramble and learn a lot of new platforms and softwares to be able to convert that 3,000 person convention, in-person convention, into a virtual one. So it was a learning curve for everyone. Obviously, trying to teach old dogs new tricks was a challenge for some of our clients. But for the most part, I would say that we had a very successful virtual campaign for doing it for the first time. But, from my lips to God's ears, we're all looking forward to, people being herd immune and for us to be able to get back to face in the best way, safest way possible.
Yeah, that's a pretty important question. So I'm going to ask that of our other panelists too. So China, you want to go next?
Sure, absolutely. So I think I might be the only one on this panel that actually changed roles during the pandemic. So in March, pre-pandemic, I was actually working for Hyatt for 8 years in operations. So I did a lot with food and beverage and events. And then in the past few months, I've actually transitioned to Amazon, where, like I said, I'm working in global specialty fulfillment. So essentially, if you order Prime delivery from Whole Foods, most likely my team or someone around the country is delivering that for you. But I would say overall, in regards to operations across industries with customer-facing roles, health and sanitation has been more prominent now than it ever has been, just to ensure the safety of our customers and also our colleagues as well. So that's something that we've been talking a lot about, we've been tracking, and obviously there's definitely a business case to this, but something that I think, post-pandemic will continue to be area of a focus in both industries.
Great, thank you. And Amy, you're living kind of at the core of where coronavirus had its most significant effect. So how has your world changed?
Yeah, so I've been obviously more boots on the ground because I'm senior living in healthcare. Everyone's seen on the news, what's been happening, and unfortunately, it's true. So my role turned very much coach, cheerleader, calmer of the people. It really turned into a jack of all trades role. I had to be incredibly adaptable because things were changing faster than we could even keep up. And especially, as you can imagine, in a healthcare model, we had to keep, employee safety as well as resident and patient safety forefront of mind. So my role changed very drastically. There were days I was a dishwasher, and there were some days where, I was consoling an employee who was crying because they were terrified. But I think that comes part of the hospitality industry, and I think you'll hear more about that today.
Great, thanks. I appreciate that. You actually raised an interesting question, Amy, and I'll kind of throw this out to the panel. You mentioned the whole mental health concern, and again, teaching as I do for a living, it's been a tremendous level of stress and anxiety in everybody because this pandemic has affected every industry and every person in different ways. So, that whole mental health and total well-being issue is something that's popped up a lot. So, Alex, what do you think about that? You're part of the team, obviously, and you work within a company. How have you seen dealing with kind of that whole person concept, throughout the past, I hate to say it, throughout the past year, literally?
Yeah, I think in my position, being that I'm in sales, I don't look at my interactions with my clients as sales. I try to establish real, true relationships. So when I ask and I call and ask how they're doing, I give it like 5-10 minutes, and I really want to know how they're doing. I'm interested in knowing how the business is doing. Really getting down to like the granular, like interpersonal skills that we all learned at STHM. I think we all sort of gravitated to STHM because we're people persons, you know, we have great interpersonal skills. We care about how people feel. It's not just a surface level question. So I think a lot of my clients really appreciated that. And some of the calls weren't about business at all. It was really just a check-in, and you'd be surprised like how people are really coping, dealing with the stress, and, you know, giving some people some space, you know, letting you guys know, hey, I'll give you guys a couple weeks. You know, this is where we're going with the organization, but, you know, let me know when things are a little bit easier for you guys. Also giving, you know, discretions when it comes to like, you know, fees and you know, things that typically would have cost them money, like learning how to defer that and really understand like no one's really going to make a profit this year. You know, like we all have to just be just good stewards of each other as a human race, and we'll get back to business later.
Thank you. China, how would you deal with that? Because again, you're part of a big team of people, and you know, how are you dealing with your folks in this pandemic?
No, for sure. I think Alex made a really good point with that. And I think that, you know, in regards to temperature checks, not just literally, we're doing temperature checks to ensure the physical safety of all of our colleagues and customers, but also, you know, a mental temperature check just to kind of see how everyone is. And I think in my role, you know, I have 500 associates on my team that are mostly part-time. And, you know, a lot of the interactions we had previously, unfortunately, were just very, you know, high and by, kind of hitting the basic touch points. But as Alex mentioned, there has been a lot more conversation and engagement with the team in regards to how they're doing outside of work, you know, like not having those conversations always about metrics or to-do lists and things like that. But, you know, how's your family doing? How are your kids doing? You know, how's schooling going for your children and things like that? And kind of just, you know, taking the time to show the team that, you know, we really do care about their full well-being. Because I think that, you know, a lot of times we try to say, you know, leave what's outside of work. And when you come to work, focus on, you know, what's going on here. But, you know, in a pandemic, and there's, you know, financial, mental, physical challenges that we're all facing, it's really hard to do that in a lot of cases. So I think focusing on the total well-being of our associates is definitely a key to a return, you know, definitely a business case for making sure that's a priority over, like you said, money all the times or revenue and things like that.
Amy, since you've raised the question, what do you think about that?
Yeah, so I think although the catch word of last year seemed to be pivot, because that's the only word you ever heard, the second important word of last year was empathy. Because I think this pandemic has taught everybody, regardless of what level you are in your organization or where you are in school, empathy is the word of last year and going into this year. You just don't ever know what people are going through, whether it be personally or professionally. And I think that's just such an important thing that us as professionals and as hospitality leaders, you know, everyone needs to be thinking about each other during this time.
Yeah, pivot is a word I hope never to use again once this is behind us. That's in my list of words I'm never going to use again. Empathy I will continue to use, but pivot, I think that one's gonna get flushed when this is all over. Erica, how about you on that question?
Yeah, I think a lot of similar things to what all the other panelists have said. I mean, with my check-ins with all my managers and my coworkers, I feel like we start always with, how are you? How's your family? Because some of them have family internationally, some of them have family locally. So we just like to know and check in to make sure everyone's okay. And then we get into all the projects that we're working on. But it's definitely been nice to see over the past year, like you said, Amy, how much empathy has come out of this. Like, I feel like everyone has been very humanized when we would normally be so nervous to talk to certain people or nervous to do certain things. I think we all just remember that we're all going through this like similar situation and difficult time in life.
Yeah, and I like to think that that's one of the things that, you know, again, sitting on my side of the classroom, as it were, one of the things that I think we do a pretty good job with at STHM is training you to be people. You know, not training you. Yeah, we train you on the hard skills, and hopefully you've learned all of that. But you know, one of the things that I think we do a pretty good job with as faculty and staff of STHM is really preparing you to deal with a real world, you know, to deal with people to people situations and display those concepts of empathy and the things where we show that we really care for people, whether it's a customer whether it's a team member. And I really think that comes out in talking to alums a lot over the course of the past, year or so. That's something that they always talk about. It's like, they feel like they were prepared to be empathetic people and to be, because we go into this business because we're passionate about what we do. So when we're hit in the head with this turn the world upside down thing, we're not prepared for it, but we figure our way through it. So kind of leads me to the next question, because not only has this been a year of tremendous health issues with coronavirus, but it's been a tremendous year and challenging year from a social justice perspective. All of the tragedies that we've had to deal with over well beyond the past year, unfortunately, but certainly within the past year, social justice and access to vaccines and access to testing has really become, surfaced a little bit more in the endemic racism that unfortunately exists in society. How do we as human beings in the hospitality trained industry deal with some of those kinds of things? So Alex, you want to start us off on that one?
It's a challenge because I feel like it's just been getting a lot more flashlight shined on it now due to the fact that we're in a social media world. But this has been going on for eons and eons and eons. But with the social injustices that have been going on top of the pandemic, I'm sure persons of colors have definitely been in a challenging situation to try to code switch even more so than we typically have to on a day-to-day basis. When you see what's going on in television, it's kind of difficult not to have it affect you and then have to go to work and still be functional at a high level. It was definitely a challenge of your mental faculties, your professional faculties, dealing with people that don't have empathy or choose to look the opposite way when it comes to social injustices. So it's been a challenge personally for myself and, for a lot of people in my family that, we're all professionals here and we all want to go to work and do the best job possible. But it's also a challenge when people don't seem to care. So it's a delicate balance because obviously you don't want to bring politics and too many things to work. But it's kind of challenging when you're looking at CNN and Fox News and MSNBC and it's front and center. So it's kind of hard to turn away from it. So it's a challenge and it's going to be an ongoing challenge for a while. But I do see that there is a shift going on in the world and more people from more and more races are being more and more empathetic across the board, not just for African Americans and Hispanics, but for the LGBTQ community, everyone in general. Everyone has a cause, but I think we all should just be knowledgeable and empathetic for everyone's respective cause that's going on right now. So it's a loaded question. We could spend the next year talking about this.
Yeah, easily. We could do weeks and weeks on this particular topic, but obviously we know it's important to address and it's at least touching on the conversation. And Erica, I mean, you work for you work in DC and for DC and obviously right now Washington DC has been the focus of some challenges, shall we say, over the past couple of months. And the tourist destinations look very different than they did prior to January. How does your company and you kind of look at some of those things, and how does that kind of tie in some of the things that Alex said?
Yeah, so it's been very interesting this year to work for DC and in DC because of everything that's been happening. I mean, even before this, DC has always been the location for First Amendment demonstrations, people who want to come out and fight for what they believe in, have protests, any kind of demonstration, marches, you name it, it's all happening here. And it's definitely been interesting to see it happen while in a pandemic. It's difficult because people would call us wanting to participate in different marches and activities going on in the city, but we also have to highlight the importance of safety within a pandemic. So we have to work a lot with the mayor's office to make sure that we are properly conveying all the requirements that people have for visitors to come to the city, to make sure that they're able to still engage in those First Amendment protests and demonstrations that happen in DC. And it's definitely been a year that signifies how the difficulties and opportunities that come from being in a DMO where you can't control the product that you're selling, but you have to continue to sell the city anyway and do it in the right way. So I think it's definitely been eye-opening and interesting to be a part of. Yeah. Oh, and also when it comes to DEI, our CEO, Elliot Ferguson, he's been absolutely fantastic at making sure that those kinds of topics stay top of mind for us. Our organization recently implemented a DEI task force that's going to be taking off in the next couple of months to make sure that those conversations stay at the forefront of our minds, that we have uncomfortable conversations that can create a safer and more comfortable workplace for everyone. So I'm really thankful to work for Destination DC during all this.
Absolutely. Yeah, really good point. The whole DEI conversation is one that, has been going on for a really long time. And as, Alex said, it's kind of been spotlighted over the past year. And I think maybe it's made some people have what can be difficult conversations, but important conversations. China, how would you address that question?
For sure. So I would say, from the corporate perspective, I think it's important to recognize, especially in large organizations, that everyone has a different perspective, experience, within a corporation. So while my experience might be amazing, there's other people that might have a very different experience based on the team they're on and, the projects and things they support. But I will say that, the companies that I've seen that I think have done it well and, really have put an emphasis on DEI and making sure their associates are okay and things like that, really provided a platform for associates and a space for them to speak freely about how they feel, but also not put pressure on certain people to be representative of a group of people. So I think that, in some cases, there's organizations that, you become the voice of a people. And I don't think that's necessarily fair. But I think that, when corporations really take the time to get to know associates on the granular level and get to know their challenges and their individual issues, and then kind of get that perspective from many different people within the organization, and then take those ideas and create a task force or some type of plan to execute on that. I think that's definitely the best way to do it. So, yeah.
Great, thank you. And Amy, how about you?
Yeah, I agree with all the panelists said, and I think it's just so important to hone in on your employee resource groups through your organizations. They have ones that you can learn from, you can collaborate with each other, but more importantly, if something isn't right, speak up about it. Don't be afraid to constructively voice your opinion in a collaborative way so that your organization can learn from you and your experiences, but then help others to grow too.
Thank you. Yeah, and again, it's something that at STHM we've talked about it, and we always, I think, try to have that dialogue. But this year in particular, with our new strategic plan that just launched recently, we actually now have a DEI office with 2 people running that, working in that and doing very regular DEI training and DEI seminars. And Fox has the same thing at the business school, and it's something that Temple University, because of the mission of Temple University and physically where Temple University sits in the city of Philadelphia, has always had to pay close attention to diversity, equity, and inclusion. It's kind of part of the mission. And I do think that STHM, it's something that we don't want to try and be followers. We want to try and be leaders in it. So, again, we can all be better at it, but I think we're certainly looking at challenges that we faced over the past year, and those challenges aren't, unfortunately, magically going to go away, although we'd like it to do that. So, on a we've talked a little doom and gloom, and we've talked pandemic, and we've talked mental health, and we've talked DEI a little bit. So let's kind of look forward again. If we're to believe what our political leaders are telling us, and look at the vaccination kinds of things, and look at the infection rates that are going down and vaccination rates are going up, there's this light at the end of the tunnel. I always say, I hope it's not a freight train coming directly at us, but there is this this feeling that of this cautious optimism now. So in our industry, in tourism, hospitality, sport, anything that we're working in, what do you see coming back first? What do you kind of see opening up before other kinds of things? So why don't we start with Erica on that one?
Yeah, so like you said, I also hope the light at that end of that tunnel is not a freight train coming at us. That was funny. I haven't heard that before. But so far, from my perspective in my department, we, myself and a couple of my colleagues, answer visitor phone calls that come through. And since the vaccination, since vaccines have been more readily available to people and people are able to get vaccinated, we've definitely seen an uptick of calls, people who are vaccinated and want to know when they can visit DC, how they can visit DC, what do they have to do to get here, what kind of records do they have to show, do they still have to get a COVID test, and then of course, what can they do when they're here? So there's a lot of pent up travel demand that's going to be coming out. And a lot of it so far has been family travel. People are interested, like my son lives just outside of DC. My daughter lives in the area. We want to come and see them. And like while we're there, we'd love to see the cherry blossoms, which is going to be happening shortly. But yeah, it's been positive to hear all those phone calls. And the number of calls we've been getting has increased. Like for the first time, it's hit over 30 calls a day for the first time since last March 13th, I think the last day when the world was kind of normal. So definitely some positive, hopeful vibes coming our way.
Yeah, it's kind of funny, that light at the end of the tunnel thing. I'm literally in the next couple of weeks doing like 3 presentations on, where the industry's going from here. And I actually have a slide that's got a freight train on it with a big light. So I kind of use that one in a PowerPoint presentation. Alex, what do you think?
I think what's coming next for us, hopefully, yes, that the vaccines and we get to a better place. I think transient travel is going to start coming back a little bit more. Folks do have a lot of pent up sort of cabin fever, and they're ready to get out and explore the world. Obviously, we want to do it safely. Ironically, Eric, I'm going to be driving up from Georgia on Friday up to DC. I have a condo that I'm trying to sell, but just trying to be as cognizant as possible of your surroundings. I'm trying to be safe, but I think transient is probably going to happen first. And from my industry, corporate travel, we're already looking forward towards 2022. Our next convention is going to be in Tampa, Florida. So we're looking at all the ways to try to be safe and implement social, it's not social, I still have that on my mind from before, space in between persons, social distancing, and just trying to be good stewards of what the administration is trying to showcase for us in terms of best practices, and try to do the best that we can just to bring people back safely as best as possible. I know folks are just really eager to get back to face because in my industry, it's more about steak and potatoes and grabbing a beer after the convention, opposed to doing things virtually. So we just want to make sure we're doing things safe. So I think it's transient, and then business travel is going to happen shortly after that.
Thank you. And Amy, you I know, because we know each other, I know it's not just about the job. You're very involved with travel to Escala and lots of different things that you do, your side hustles and your side blogs. So where do you see it, both from your job perspective and then the other part of your life with your travel blogs and all of those neat things that you do?
Yeah, so I think it's really interesting to see, especially the senior living and healthcare sector, the most vulnerable of the populations, they're ready to get out. I mean, you can't really, an old person, you can't really keep them cooped up, and they've already been cooped up for a year. So it's now figuring out how do we safely allow them to dine and socialize in a restaurant setting. So, you're losing those buffets, but then you just got to rethink your service models to make sure that you're still providing that high-end experience. And it's just very much taking baby steps, even though they're ready to jump into the deep end. It's how do you manage their expectations and make sure you're still delivering them a great product. So I think that's really interesting to see, and it is coming quickly because these folks are ready to get out and live their lives again, and they're ready to go now. And then just, from a SCAL perspective, so SCAL is a professional travel organization that, we're very well connected throughout the United States in terms with other travel organizations. And, things are positive. Like the other panelists have said, people are ready to travel. There is a lot of pent up demand. And, I get out when I can now, and you see people traveling, and it's a wonderful thing to see.
Thank you. And Johnny, you look at things from a couple different perspectives, because again, you spent all that time at Hyatt, and I'm sure you still have plenty of friends and colleagues that you talk to from Hyatt, and now working with Amazon. Where do you see us going?
For sure. So in regards to the hospitality industry, I mean, I know now even my colleagues that work in Georgia, Florida, Texas, they're requesting help like immediately. So our hotels in the South and the states that are starting to open now, they are desperately needing assistance. Unfortunately, a lot of people that were out of work during this time, they found other jobs. So now we're seeing hotels in a situation where they don't even have enough staff to accommodate all the guests that are coming. So on one hand, that's a great thing to see that states are opening up and people are able to travel. And then we hope obviously that a lot of these people are vaccinated and still, maintaining distance and things like that until we can get to a point where, we aren't, facing, the transfer of this disease and things like that. I will say from the tech or, e-commerce industry, Amazon in particular, I think that a lot of the business we saw start during the pandemic. I think that, moving out of this pandemic, I think that'll stay, especially in the grocery industry. A lot of people are getting food delivered to their homes and they like it, so I think it's something that, we've been able to create a demand for a service that people typically didn't use, especially in the grocery industry. But I think now that they're more comfortable with it, we've shown them that we can safely provide them good quality food delivered to their homes at their convenience. I think it's something that will definitely stay moving out of the pandemic as well.
Yeah, it's interesting to hear that, China, because I think, again, there's not a whole lot of good things that we can say about the past year and the terrible tragedies and the losses that people have faced economically, certainly emotionally. Lots of people have lost lots of people. So it's been horrible in every sense of the word. But I think as an industry, many different industries have learned some positive lessons, I think, from this. Certainly that category, that segment. I think we've learned a lot more about hybrid events. Again, virtual events as standalones are, they're not engaging. They're very difficult. But I think the world of hybrid has changed the way a lot of people think, particularly, in the convention industry. People are seeing changes with, I have typically 100 people at my live conference because people have to fly there and stay in hotels and spend a lot of money. I have 450 people at a hybrid conference. So, I think that model is going to adjust a little bit. So, we talked about which segments of the industry are going to come back first. And I agree that transient, that regional travel, that friends and family thing is going to be kind of the first piece that comes back. What's going to take longer, do you think? What's going to be the last pieces of the industry that come back? Oops. Let's start out with Erica on that one.
Yeah, I don't know which would be the very last to come back. But in my mind, I know I was talking with some of my colleagues and we have a lot of international clients and a lot of international tourists come to DC. And I think it's going to take a little bit for international travel to be able to come back in the way that it was before. It was a very strong segment, especially here in DC, because I think a lot of it's going to have to do with how do we determine if someone has the vaccine? Is it required for them to have the vaccine to come here? What does that look like? A lot of international clients have been wondering what the States is going to do, because for them, they get their vaccine, it's uploaded and attached to their social security card, their passport. But here we have, I think I've heard we have paper cards that people are getting when they're vaccinated. So it's very interesting. We're wondering what's going to happen. They want to come. We know the international travelers are dying to get back over here and explore the United States, but I think it's going to take a little bit before they're able to, sadly.
Yeah, you're right about the paper cards. I got my first shot, so I got my little paper card sitting over there, which another 2 weeks, I'll be good to go. But yeah, international travel and there's a lot of conversation internationally and with the airlines and because the airlines, obviously, they want international butts in those seats sooner rather than later. So I think you're right about that challenge. Alex, what do you think?
Yeah, I think Erica hit the nail on the head. I think it's going to be the international travel and then also large conventions. I think convention centers have a challenge on their hand in regards to, finding ways to socially distance people as best as possible, but also, maintaining their profit margins. I think contracts in terms of, exit strategies for companies on my end versus, convention centers and hotels is going to be a challenge because, if it gets to a point where, God forbid, that train comes down and hits us again, we have to stop and we have to reset all over again. But we have to do hybrid events. And I think that's going to be the buzzword for the next couple of years is hybrid. Everything's not going to be face to face. So we all learned how to use technology over this past year. And I don't see technology sort of taking a pause. Technology just keeps pressing forward every day, every week, every month. It's a new technology, and the Zooms and the Microsoft Teams, like they're only going to keep introducing more and more software to keep us engaged just the way that we are right now. So I think the international businesses are probably going to be doing more of this opposed to flying in until we actually get sort of a COVID passport, to make sure that people are safely coming into our borders.
China, what do you think about that one?
I would definitely agree with Erica and Alex on that and echo exactly what they said. From a corporate perspective, I would say, though, I think the individual business traveler, I think companies will reconsider the financial benefit of, sending someone to another state for an hour or two for a meeting and, just for them to turn around. I think that, companies will definitely look at this a little bit differently moving forward and realize that, hey, we were able to have, a virtual meeting as opposed to flying someone across the country for 2 hours and, the economic standpoint on that. So I think in that regard, obviously, like Alex mentioned, people definitely want to get out and, there's nothing that compares to face-to-face, but I think that people will definitely reconsider the financial impact of those meetings and the value added for, sending their individual business travelers out.
And Amy, what do you think?
Oh, I love watching this, but it's so sad to see, what's happened to the cruise industry. I mean, that's just one industry that has just been on hold for a year. And, there's talk about it not coming back for another 6 to 9 months. And I think it's interesting because you see companies like Royal Caribbean who are doing more national based cruises from Asia for folks from Asia, but nobody else is allowed on them. And they're just about to launch in Israel. So it's really cool to see the innovation that's now coming out of this, as unfortunate as it is that they've been on hold. But I think the optimization and efficiencies they now find in their business model is something that's going to stick around and probably chart the course for some aspects of hospitality now for potentially forever. I mean, you look at cruise ships, just buffet models. I mean, buffet models are going to be mostly obsolete, if not changed forever. So I really think it's a interesting example to see about how they're now charting their course for the next couple years to come.
Yeah, great. And we did have one question, and it's apropos for what our conversation is right now. So the question was, what will you do to attract international visitors back? And I think, Erica, that's a good one for you because of where you sit and what you do, and the fact that as you mentioned, international tourism, DC is one of the top 5 destinations or so for international travels from a city perspective. And again, you get New York, you get Disney World, obviously, but Washington DC is a huge, has been a huge hub for international travelers, and I'm sure at Destination DC. There's people in your company talking about that. So again, you don't have to give us any secrets, but if you've heard any buzz from colleagues about some of those questions, be interesting to hear from your perspective.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's a very timely question because this week right now, a group of our senior staff members are working through some pitches for our recovery campaign of how we're going to come back to start attracting visitors, not only internationally, but also domestically. Because it has to be done right, and you have to look through all your options and find the best one to move forward with. As to the international clients that we're looking to welcome back at some point, we are just staying in touch with them, letting them know that even though they can't be here and we can't be there, because normally we have managers who go on sales missions to countries and states, all over the United States and the world. So even though we can't be together in person, we're staying in touch through trade shows that are happening virtually and the virtual client events. Our virtual fam tours have been very well received because they're just kind of a fun, upbeat way to remind people of what's happening in DC and give them some inspiration for what they can do in the future. So just keeping in contact, those relationships are really important in our industry.
Great. And it's for a second, I'll put on the professor hat, because in the summer I teach a course in global tourism and destination events. And that was a real challenge teaching that course last semester, because there was no global tourism or destination events. So it could have been should have been like a 15-minute class, but we did it for 5 weeks anyway. So in talking to colleagues around the world and prepping for that, it's very much that nobody's ready to do it yet. So it becomes the preparation and what we're going to do when, and the virtual kinds of things, because pent up travel demand, it's going to be regionally first, nationally second, and then internationally down the road, and there may be that, Alex, you might have mentioned it, kind of that vaccination passport, in a lot of international destinations. Clearly you need to show a passport, you need to show a visa in some countries. Will the International Association of Travel Agents and the airlines and the World Health Organization come up with some kind of health passport? And if so, what does that look like? And again, we go into the whole, social justice and equity thing, less economically advantaged countries are going to get vaccinated later than other countries. So, it's again, as we said when we talked about social justice, that could be an easily month-long conversation. So don't want to go there, but in our industry, it is something that we definitely need to think about. So another kind of question, all of you, and we're very proud of all of our alums, and certainly those of you who are part of this today. What are some of the things that you learned at STHM that you've really been applied to, that you really have been able to apply to your job? One of the things that faculty, tries to talk about all the time is, we're trying to give you things that you're actually going to use when you get out of school. And a lot of students look at us and say, yeah, sure, we will. But we feel like we do. So you, as alums, how do you feel about it? What are some of the skill sets that you acquired at STHM that you use? And Amy, let's start with you on that one.
Sure. So I think the two things would just be building your brand and your network, and then how to market yourself outside of your organization. Because unfortunately nowadays, it seems like everybody and their cousin has a bachelor's degree. So now you have to figure out, how do you stand apart from your competition, who may very well have the exact same resume experience that you do. And it's important to brand yourself in a way that's innovative, whether that be through LinkedIn, through your professional networks. But you have to choose to stay involved. You have to choose to engage yourself in opportunities to make yourself more knowledgeable, professional, and valuable. So I think those are two things that have really benefited me so far in my career.
Yeah, it's funny that you raised that point, because one of the things that I constantly, and there's a number of you on this call who have either had me in class or have me in class now, I talk about lifelong learning. It's like, if you think in this industry, if you think you're done when you get your degree, probably not the industry you're gonna survive in, because this is, especially if we've learned anything over the past year, it's about how to reinvent ourselves and how to gain different skills that, I was fortunate, I was teaching online before we had to. So at least I had some rudimentary Zoom skills, but I've spent a lot of time trying to get better at it. So you raised a really good point there, Amy. So thank you. Alex, what do you think?
Yeah, Amy led us off really well with that. I also think that flexibility was something that I learned at STHM. My specialty was in sport and recreation management, but tourism and hospitality and sport and recreations, they all just blended all together. So you can't be tunnel vision and say that I'm just only sport and rec, because if you're a baseball player or you're a football player, you're going to need a hotel. You're going to need, there's so many different aspects of the industry that just sort of coincide. So being flexible and not just being tunnel visioned. Also, and I guess I'll say this for all of us networking, 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 networking. The people that you're sitting in your classrooms with right now, they're going to be the people that you're going to be working with in the industry, or God forbid that you lose your job. You could call, hey, China, hey, Erica, hey, Amy, this is my situation. This is where I am right now. Do you have any opportunities available? You know, you can't just sit in the class and just learn and be in a silo. You need to engage, you need to meet other people and be as diverse as possible, because STHM, as we know, Temple Owls are everywhere, but STHM, we're also global owls, then we're everywhere. So, you know, I know a lot of us are probably pupils and students under Jeff Montague and Betsy Barber and all those guys. Like they hammered that networking component down. You know, it's vital. If you don't network, you're not going to be able to survive in this industry. So I think flexibility and just, you know, utilizing your network are the strongest things that I learned from STHM.
Yeah, great point. I really appreciate that. China, how about you?
For sure. So going off of what Alex said, I would say that, you know, if there's one lesson or one tagline that I took from STHM that I'll never forget, is Dean Montag saying, be your best. It's something that, you know, he consistently says, and it's something that I'll never forget. And I go into any job, you know, any opportunity I have, knowing that I'm going to try my best, I'm going to do my best, because like you said, you never know what's going to happen. You never know when a global pandemic is going to come and you're going to change industries. So I would say definitely that, you know, going off what Amy said as well about, you know, building your personal brand, ensuring that anything you put your name on, you're proud of. And then utilizing your people skills, your transferable skills to learn how to navigate, you know, different things. Like you said, hospitality, tourism, sport, rec, there are endless opportunities, endless jobs you can do in all of those industries. So figuring out, you know, what you bring to the table and how you can relay those skills and transfer those skills to different roles is definitely going to be beneficial as you're going into your career.
Absolutely. And Erica, how about you? I mean, you can say what they said, but
I will start with saying what they said, because everybody made really great points that I just agree with. I was nodding wholeheartedly, like, yes, same. For me specifically, I will say a funny story. When I applied for my job, I didn't realize I was applying when the application window was about to close. And from senior seminar, I actually had a personal newsletter. I don't know if other people also did that assignment or still do that assignment. We had to create a personal newsletter. It was double-sided, kind of just told your story however you thought it would be told best. And I was including that on all my job applications when I graduated. I attached that with it, and I was like, here's me, everything you need to know. And it caught the eye of my now manager, my boss, when they were about to close the window and she saw my application come through with my personal newsletter, and she was like, ooh, this girl seems like she's going the extra mile. So they reopened it, interviewed me. I came back the week later for a phone interview, the week later for an in-person interview, and I had the job. And she told me that about a year afterwards. So some of your assignments can be used in real life. You take them seriously. Also, the Excel class, I took an Excel class at STHM. I really did not like it because I found it was a lot, and Excel wasn't my favorite. But if I could tell you the amount of time I spend in Excel sheets now, it's ridiculous. So definitely use those skills that you learn, and just know that everything that you're doing can be translated into your career.
I need to know about that newsletter, because I didn't learn that when I was going to STHM. So I might need to get a copy of yours so I could emulate that moving forward if I were to move on from my position, because that's a really good idea.
I'll send it to you.
Thanks.
There you go. And I tell you, you know, it's kind of funny. I've been doing what I do now at the university for a while now. And the thing, yeah, I love teaching, but what I love more than that is the relationships that we all develop with students who've been in our classes and alums now. And whoever said it, you're absolutely right, because the number of calls and emails and texts that I got from former students over the past 12 months, I don't know what to do next. I'm not sure if there's going to be a job for me here. What do I do? Who do I talk to? And I know it's not just me. It's all of us on faculty and staff who got those calls and answered those, and just to, you know, not literally talk somebody off the ledge, but, you know, I love hospitality, but I got to pay the rent, and I got to do this, and I got to do that. That's one of the things, quite frankly, that's why I do what I do, to have those relationships and to have those networking opportunities. and to be able to reach out to fellow alums and say, hey, so-and-so needs something. If you hear of anything, let me know. And that doesn't go away. That doesn't stop the day you walk, off of the then Leocora stage, or now the TPAC stage, or wherever we're going to be this May, and whatever we're going to be doing this May. That doesn't go away. And again, yeah, it's an alumni association event. But guess what? This alumni network is a really important one for the relationships that you build, not only for today, but for the next job you're looking for. So one of the things that I love about being a small part of the STHM family. So glad everybody was able to talk about that. So now I'm going to ask the opposite question. So what didn't you learn in school that you wish you had learned, and what should we at STHM be teaching some of our students? So we'll reverse it. So Erica, you get to go first on that one, and you can say I learned everything I needed to know. You can lie. I'll believe it.
That is a good question. I'm trying to think of, thinking back on all my classes, like what could I have used some more of? And honestly, I think I could have used some more information on diversity, equity, and inclusion. I think I only had one class at the time when I was there. I think Dr. Blair was the professor. Excellent class. Love Dr. Blair. If she's here, hi, you're awesome. But I think more of that would be excellent.
That's a good one. And yeah, Dr. Blair still teaches that class. If she's not on it, I'll let her know you shouted out to her.
We love you, Dr. Blair. Love you. She's fantastic.
I'll let her know.
Yeah, you just brought back some.
Tomorrow. We have a staff and faculty meeting tomorrow. I'll make sure she knows people were shouting out to her.
Yeah.
Alex, what do you think?
You just brought back some memories right there, Erica. Thanks for that. Yeah. I think I probably echoed that as well too. STHM was really, really good for me. I can't really understate it enough. I remember the very first time I came into Jeff's office to try to, sign up for STHM, and he pretty much read me my rights. He said, you gotta do this, you gotta do that, you gotta do this, you gotta do that before you even step foot into my program. You gotta be serious about it. And he's become literally a lifelong friend. He's actually become a brother. So I had a tremendous STHM experience. I don't really know what I could have learned more of. Probably even taking maybe I think it's more personal more than anything else, like probably taking advantage of all of the opportunities that was available to me at that time. I really wish I took a study abroad opportunity when I had the chance to become even more well-rounded, because the world is becoming a lot smaller. The degree of separation is tremendously small now. So that's something I personally think that I probably should have taken more of advantage of. But I had some amazing professors, and they really did guide me in the best way possible. And they never closed the door when I had a question. If I had an email or phone call, they were always there. So it was more personal for me in terms of my own ownership of taking advantage of what they offered for me at that time, because the world has changed since when I graduated. So China's experience is different, Erica's experience is different, Amy's experience is different, and I'm sure the course that you're teaching now, Professor Rosen, are you have to adjust for the time. So what was applicable for me then probably isn't applicable for the students now. So like what you said, staying learned as much as possible and try to plug into the industry as much as possible, and not trying to be left behind. So I think that's my answer. I think STHM is fantastic. Not to be on a soapbox, but you guys really helped guide my career. My senior internship turned into a full-time career. It afforded me a position upon graduation. So the junior internships, the senior internships, like you guys really should take advantage of those to the best of your ability, because that can really catapult your career. We could have another conversation about, just how my senior internship was so amazing, and I got to travel the world and meet just about every and all sports and entertainment person you can even think about by the age of 19, 20. So STHM owes me nothing.
Thank you, appreciate that. Yeah, and again, my Montag story as a colleague, when he heard that I was moderating this panel, he texted me and gave me a load of crap for it. So it's all good. Amy, how about you?
Yeah, I think STHM didn't teach me how to manage people and lead people. I think that's just something you just got to get out there and experience. I mean, I think about the leader I was when I first started out, and I'm sure I said the wrong things and I'm sure I led the wrong way, but you're given the tools to at least know how to fumble your way through that. And it's only through your experience and your experience of leading, frontline employees that you really understand how to do that. So, take all the opportunities you can at Temple, and take those opportunities to try being a leader, and then when you get into your career, it'll be so much easier for you.
Thank you. And then last but not least, China.
Amy definitely took my answer. I was definitely going to say something about leadership, but to piggyback off of that, I will say, on the flip side, for sure, I think that, there's certain things, being a manager, being a leader, there's certain things that can't be taught and you only learn them by experience. But I will say that, take advantage of the leadership opportunities you have while you're in school. I remember, when I was in senior sim, I kicked and screamed when Professor Riddle made me the president of my section. Definitely wasn't something I signed up for. And I think that, I wish I would have embraced a little bit more at the time, because I think that, those leadership roles in your SPOs and senior seminar and, student worker jobs, while you're in college definitely will help you get that experience a little bit before you go out into the real world and have to manage people. And I'll also say that, if you haven't already taken this class and you have the opportunity to, I took a class on ethics and morals with my business minor through HR in the Fox School of Business, that I think that was so beneficial to any industry, any job you'll go into, learning how to interact with people, learning how to do it ethically, learning how to make sure that your morals are aligned with your company and things like that. So I would say, a little piece of advice for all the students, if you haven't taken the class, definitely try to take that class.
You're muted, Alex. There,
So to piggyback off of what China said with senior seminar, for the students that are on this panel right now, don't be afraid to stretch yourselves. Your professors are probably going to put you in a situation knowing that you're going to be uncomfortable. They know what your skills and your strengths are. So if they see that there's something lacking, they're going to push you and put you in a position of leadership, or being the head of a particular department or role. So embrace that, because they just see that it's an area that you could grow yourself, and trust and believe. 5 years, 10 years, 20 years in your career, you're going to think back and say, thank you, professor, for that opportunity. Thank you, professor, for stretching me, because you have to be flexible. Don't be afraid to be flexible.
Great. And so for our last question, because we're winding down here, time flies when you're having fun, right? This is one from one of our participants. You see being tech savvy as a required skill in the sport, rec, and tourism hospitality industry moving forward due to the virtual event space created by COVID. So I'm seeing a lot of head nods. China, why don't you do that one? And I think that will probably take us to the end. So why don't you hop in and do that one?
For sure. I mean, I think moving forward now, being tech savvy is going to be a requirement in any industry that we work in. Now, working in the tech industry, I would say, it's definitely something that is a necessity. And I think that the companies that want to come out of this ahead of the game are definitely going to utilize different resources, different technology to kind of further interact with their customers, their guests, their clientele, where like we mentioned, might not be able to do so face-to-face, but if they can figure out a way to virtually or in person engage their customers, it's definitely something that is going to push them a little bit further ahead of their competitors.
Great. Anybody else want to jump on that one? I think that was a pretty good answer. I think we're at just 5 o'clock now. So I think I'm going to toss it back to either Elena or Niyoshi to finish this out. Looks like Elena.
Thanks, Professor Rosen. Thank you to Professor Rosen and to all of our panelists for sharing their perspectives today. I have to commend all of you for your resilience and dedication to the hospitality and tourism industries. I know it's a long road ahead to recovery post-pandemic, but it's hard not to be optimistic knowing the passion that you bring to your professions. So I think that these industries are in good hands. Before we close, I do want to invite everyone to stay in touch with the MAC by following them on Instagram at STHM MAC. I also want to invite you to provide feedback and suggestions for programming through the Max event survey. I'm going to add this link to the survey in the chat in a moment. So with that, this concludes today's webinar. A recording will be available in the coming week on both our STHM Connections platform and on the Max YouTube channel. Thank you all for joining us and have a great night.